When you see the History Machine, you know we're out in the community discovering stories that matter. Today, we're visiting Bethlehem Temple Church, a congregation whose roots reach back to the early formation of Flint's African American community. Bethlehem Temple's story begins in the early 1920s, at a time when Flint's African American population was still relatively small, making up only about 2% of the city's population at most. This was a moment when Black families were just beginning to establish permanent community institutions in Flint.
In those early years, churches like Bethlehem Temple were essential. They offered spiritual grounding, social connection, and leadership at a time when African Americans faced isolation, limited housing options, and significant barriers to opportunity.
As Flint's Black population grew in the decades that followed, Bethlehem Temple grew with it. The congregation moved several times before establishing a long-term home on Detroit Street, now Martin Luther King Avenue. They purchased this property from a Seventh-day Adventist congregation in 1968, anchoring the church firmly within the city's north side. I know Phillip Thompson from our university's Office of Economic Development and Community Engagement, but he's also pastor here at Bethlehem Temple. Phillip, considering that the African American population in Flint has grown from just a couple of thousand to a majority of the city's population, how do you think churches like this have changed, and how has their role in the city changed?
Well, that's an excellent question. When I think about it, our church got started during the dark night of discrimination. And there's no question that African Americans were kind of shut off from opportunity, but somehow they found the way to carve out community for themselves. And it happened in the spiritual community, right? It happened in the context of the sacred experience. But of course, over time, as our country began to change and mold itself into a beloved community that welcomed everybody, although we still have challenges in that area, but we're still much better than what we've ever been. But that being said, I think the role of the church has changed in the sense that now churches are a bit nuanced, if I can say that, because no longer do Black people need assistance in assimilating into culture. They don't need that, right? They don't need really help with voting, although some churches still serve in that role. But for the vast majority of people, the things that used to be barriers are no longer that way. So I think the church has kind of come from here, and now it's kind of narrowing in its scope of its activity. And of course, the gospel is the message and the mission of the church. But I do see the church as having this anchor institution role, right? It serves as the place that people in the community can look to as a beautiful edifice. The grass is always cut, right? The grounds are always well kept. It's a peaceful, serene environment. And so I think that's probably where the church is now. Maybe not doing all of the social things that it once did and still dabbling in it, but just not necessarily the major focus and goal of it.
From its earliest days, Bethlehem Temple has been more than a place of worship. It served as a center for education, youth development, and public service, helping families navigate both periods of growth and moments of hardship.
Today, Bethlehem Temple continues this tradition of care, remaining a trusted space where faith, mutual support, and community responsibility come together.
Bethlehem Temple matters because it represents the early foundations of Flint's African American community. Established when the community was small and vulnerable, the church helped create stability, leadership, and belonging that carried forward into later generations. Its story reminds us that sacred spaces are not only defined by when they were built, but by how communities use them over time. Through persistence, faith, and service, Bethlehem Temple shows how belief becomes action and how history continues to shape the city.